Do not labor for the food that perishes, but for the food that remains, that lasts, that endures to eternal life. The root is ergadzesthe, which has the root of inside it, inside, en, and the root of ergon, a work. We have that coming into English in the word energy, energize. The power inside us, the energy in us, goes into what we do. And we can be energized by something. There is energy in the living being, which has been given by the power that made the universe. It's all his, on loan, until we have no more air in us to keep us alive. We are part of creation, and we are placed in a part of creation, as it were, to till the soil of that part of the garden, of the vineyard, where we are placed. Bloom where you are planted. And we must do well that which is commissioned unto us by the Creator. The teacher must teach well. The mother must be caring. The father must, in the name of God, exercise authority. The worker must do well and not shoddily that work which helps people to survive. So surviving is the ongoing process which is sustained by all the work going on this planet. We help each other. Normally, if one can, one does what one is good at. A good teacher is a good teacher. A good handyman is a useful specimen. There where he is, he can do things which a good teacher might not be able to do. We complement each other, as also in marriage. And a good community also will have the talents and gifts which will make it possible to do everything within the brotherhood. But there is one specific area which is worth looking at in the context of this verse. It's that of the ones that out of society might feel called to give themselves directly to the Lord's service. Not only consecrated in baptism, but also consecrated in vows. The one that has always been there from the Lord's own institution of it is the hierarchical structure. Those called to be conformed to Christ by major orders and to tend to the spiritual side of existence for their brethren, to get them to heaven. But then there is also, and there has been from early times, the element of consecrated life, which is, if in the monastic sphere, essentially not based on the priesthood, that can be added, but on continuous prayer. And that, especially in the West, has evolved into various forms of consecration, often with a specialization. In the East, it didn't evolve in the same way. They all there belong to the great ancient succession and fraternity, brotherhood of monks going back to the desert of Egypt. One doesn't become a monk just like that, one receives it, and one is part of an ancient heritage. But they don't have orders and congregations as we do. Now, as time went on, an evolution took place in the West, which is quite interesting. that line which came from the desert was taken up by St. Benedict. He codified the best of the East, and much of the Eastern spirituality of the desert is there, passing through. The influence of St. John Cassian is there. Both St. Benedict and the early Eastern fathers of the desert did not insist on the priesthood. It was essentially a lay charism. It could be given, but it wasn't going to be based on that. And that's going to make a difference. Why? They are going, therefore, to go towards a system of self-sustainment, that is self-sufficiency, by work. And the early centuries see a fairly simple form of work which allows the mind to be free and the spirit to go into continuous engagement with God, unbroken prayer. The maxim, pray without ceasing. No compartment for prayer in church, quite separate from that, making baskets. As time goes on, and the monks live more and more together, they are able to do more things because they can then specialize also in forming young people, and education can come into that. But the bottom line is that they are self-sufficient. In the West, because St. Benedict, who codifies the best of the East, they are open to both manual work and intellectual work. They transmit, of course, learning through copying of manuscripts, but also through teaching. And it's not for no reason that St. Benedict is the patron of Europe. Through him, through his descendants, culture was preserved and transmitted very well. But the bottom line still was that the monastery worked and did not depend on alms. There is the parallel line coming from St. Augustine. Now he was an intellectual, and very quickly he was ordained a priest. And those who gravitated towards him were drawn by the radiation of warmth, friendship and charity, cor unum, one heart, but were also very often quite intellectual and were able to be ordained. And that pattern carried on when he became bishop. The episcopion, the place where he lived, also was able to house others, and they were magnetized by him even there. And they would have been clerics, priests, and because they were of quality, formed by him, they were also very often future bishops, because there were bishops in the whole of North Africa at the time. Every town had its bishop. So that was based not on self-sufficiency through work, manual work, but through being ordained. And that is a different dynamic. And that can be seen evolving in the West in the parallel movement of canons regula. Now they were heavily monasticized by some congregations like the Premonstratensians in the Middle Ages, and externally there will be very little difference between a fervent Premonstratensian abbey and a Cistercian one. The solemn worship of God was central, and there was also stability until death in one place. And those who did not have duties outside were living a contemplative life. But internally there was difference of dynamic. Whereas St. Benedict does not foresee the ordination of more of the brethren that are needed for the needs of the community itself. In the other ordination is given, and the fact is that once ordained and also able to be useful, one is used. And therefore, the priesthood itself is the source of economic survival of one of these communities. Now, in practice, that does make a difference and still does to this day. Why? Because although it is a disadvantage to have the complication in the mind of having to deal with souls and therefore contacts, there is the fact that one is living all the time on one's priesthood and doing all the time priestly activities. The other formula of being free from contact with the world and doing work which is liberating for the spirit, but actually quite simple, is by nature less of a danger with regard to dispersivity, dispersion of the mind and spirit. And that is favoured by the strict monastic life which involves separation from the world. If it is done in silence, there is no separation between choir and work. It's one straight line, one continuum, and it makes sense. C'est un tout qui tient. It's a whole that holds together. A body of doctrine, the monastic ethos, which when lived, functions and leads to intimacy all the time with Jesus Christ, unbroken. But the question then poses itself, which way should one go? If one opts to give one's energy, coming back to this verse from the Gospel, give your energy to the food that lasts unto life everlasting, there, if one can remain in the same unbroken line of prayer all the time, then one is actually reproducing the life of the Son of Man. And that was picked up by one good Premonstratensian author, the Abbot of Averboad. It is producing the Christus totus, the whole Christ. But there is a problem, and it was recognized by the monastic authors, a recognition of human fragility, that actually it's very difficult, because the more pores are open towards the world, the more the internal energy is dispersed. And the more pastoral one becomes, the more, by osmosis, one becomes similar to what is around one. And it is difficult at times to maintain the mode of gazing at Jesus all the time. Humanly speaking, one is divided. Having said that, there is the synthesis given by St. Thomas Aquinas, who's actually following the rule of St. Augustine. And it is this: contemplare, to contemplate, et contemplata aliis tradere, and to hand on to others the thing is contemplated. He himself was a great mystic and a great contemplative, and I'm sure that in him there was no moment of non-prayer, non-union with Jesus. So the great saints were able to combine the two and not leak. That is the problem. Energy lost through leakage. This verse can be taken as a verse for life. Ergadzeste, give your energy to. The food, the activity, the thing, right now, that has to do with eternal life. There's an old saying, quid hoc ad eternitatem. What does this serve? act for eternity. There is an order in life. To give much energy to lightness, emptiness, is to leak badly. To give just enough energy to be a warm presence is good. But let us remember that we're only here once, and the time and the energy that we have is limited. Let us therefore be energized with interiority, not leak at all, but aim well where we expend our energy, avoiding any moment when we're not in union with Jesus, and allowing Him to aim our energy there where He wants it to be effective.